So what does it really take to build an empire? It's a question that just echoes through history. It takes way more than just a kingdom. It demands ambition, a solid strategy, and power on a scale that can unite an entire subcontinent. Today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of how India's first great empire, the Mauryan Empire, was born from this wild mix of brilliant strategy, economic power, and believe it or not, a dramatic change of heart. Let's get into how it all started.
Right. This simple, powerful statement, it just gets right to the point, doesn't it? We're not talking about just a bigger kingdom here. This is a totally different kind of power. So, what exactly does that even mean?
Well, the whole idea of an empire actually comes from the Latin word imperium, which basically means supreme power. And it's this idea that one single ruler, right at the center, can command not just their own kingdom, but a whole collection of them. Yeah, the local rulers might stick around, but at the end of the day, everybody answers to the emperor.
Okay, so how do you maintain that supreme power? A lot of the time, it was through a system of tributaries. A tributary kingdom had to pay tribute, gold, grain, all sorts of valuable goods, to the emperor. It was a very clear signal of submission, of loyalty. It was their way of acknowledging the emperor as the king of kings. This is pretty much the basic power dynamic that holds an empire together.
So where did India's first great empire actually begin? Well, the story doesn't start with an empire at all. It starts with one particularly powerful kingdom that just rose above all the others, the kingdom of Magadha. I want you to picture northern India between the 6th and 4th centuries BCE. It wasn't one single country. It was more like a patchwork of 16 major kingdoms, often called the Mahajanapadas. Think of it like a bunch of powerful rival states all competing with each other. And out of all this competition, one kingdom, Magadha, really started to pull ahead of the pack, setting the stage for something much, much bigger.
So, what was Magadha's secret sauce? It really wasn't luck. It was all about location, location, location. Being right on the Ganga and Son rivers gave it this massive advantage for trade and transport. This meant they had tons of food, which freed up people to become skilled artisans and traders, creating this incredible economic cycle of growth and prosperity.
This whole rise to power happened in stages. First, you had these powerful early kings who really established Magadha's dominance. Then, in the 5th century BCE, a guy named Mahapadma Nanda took it to the next level. He founded the Nanda dynasty and started unifying a lot of these smaller kingdoms. But the final, decisive step, that was taken around 321 BCE, when a new player entered the game and completely overthrew the Nandas.
And this is where the story pivots from just a powerful kingdom to a true empire. This is the story of the Mauryans, who didn't just conquer territories. No, they had a blueprint for how to build and run the whole thing.
And that blueprint, it was designed by two absolutely incredible figures. On one side, you've got Chandragupta Maurya, the ambitious founder who seized control of Magadha and just kept expanding. And on the other, his advisor, Kautilya, the master strategist, the brains behind the whole operation, who provided the political philosophy for this new empire.
Kautilya's philosophy is just brilliantly captured in his concept of Saptanga, or the 7 limbs of a kingdom. He basically argued that a state is like a living body. For it to be healthy and strong, all 7 of these parts, the king, the minister, the territory, the fort, the treasury, the army, and allies, they all have to work together in perfect harmony.
And listen, this wasn't just some abstract theory he was dreaming up. The goal here was intensely practical. Kautilya's Saptanga was a literal blueprint for building a state that was stable, rich, and secure. A state that knew when it was time to fight, when it was time to make alliances, and how to create a just society for its people.
Now, a powerful army and a brilliant strategy are, of course, essential. But an empire can't run on air. It needs a massive economic engine to keep it all going. For the Mauryas, that engine was trade.
This map right here, it really shows the lifeblood of the Mauryan economy. These lines aren't just roads. They're the great trade arteries of ancient India. You have the Uttarapatha running across the north and the Dakshinapatha in the south, creating this huge network that connected the entire subcontinent and even reached out to the rest of the world.
So what was moving along these routes? An incredible variety of valuable goods. We're talking beautiful textiles, spices, gems, amazing handicrafts, you name it. This bustling trade created immense wealth, which in turn funded the state, the army, the whole administration.
But this trade wasn't just a bunch of individuals acting on their own. Oh no. Traders, craftsmen, even farmers, they organized themselves into these powerful associations called trainees or guilds. You can kind of think of them as ancient co-ops or trade unions.
These guilds are absolutely fascinating because they show just how incredibly organized Indian society was back then. They often ran themselves with their own elected heads and officers, all working together for mutual benefit. And a smart ruler knew to just let these guilds do their thing because they were the key to a booming economy.
All right, now we turn to the most famous Mauryan emperor of them all, Chandragupta's grandson. And his story is one of the most remarkable transformations in world history, a journey from a brutal conqueror to an apostle of peace. So here you have it, the two sides of Emperor Ashoka. He started his reign as a completely ruthless conqueror, expanding the empire through bloody warfare, most famously in the Kalinga War. But what he saw on that battlefield, it changed him forever. He was so horrified by the carnage that he renounced violence completely.
Ashoka's reign, from 268 to 232 BCE, really marks this huge turning point in the empire's history. Here's a guy who inherited a vast, powerful state that was built on pure military might, and he chose to rule it with a totally different philosophy.
This quote, from one of his own edicts, it just captures that transformative moment so perfectly. He didn't try to hide his violent past. In fact, he owned it. He used it as the very reason for his profound change, choosing to adopt the path of peace taught by the Buddha.
So how do you make sure a message of peace lasts for centuries? Well, you carve it in stone. Ashoka created these incredible rock edicts and pillars all across his empire. They were basically giant public announcements sharing his new philosophy of nonviolence and his policies for the people's welfare. And these were not just empty words. Ashoka's policies, his Dhamma, were truly revolutionary. He set up medical care for both people and animals. He built infrastructure like wells and rest houses for travelers. He even promoted religious tolerance. I mean, a stunningly progressive idea for his time. In so many ways, he was an early pioneer of wildlife preservation and public welfare. And this brings us to the great paradox of empires, which the Mauryan story just shows so perfectly. They're almost always established through violence and conquest. And yet, once they're established, a well-run empire can actually bring an end to all those smaller, constant wars, creating political unity and allowing for incredible prosperity. Think about it. The Mauryan Empire was built on the strategic ambition of Chandragupta and Kautilya, but it's largely remembered for the peaceful reign of Ashoka. It leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. Is a ruler's true legacy defined by how they get their power or by how they ultimately choose to use it?